Today in our 2018 Jeep Wrangler JK Unlimited, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster InvisiBrake Supplemental Braking System, part number RM-8700. Whenever we're flat towing our Jeep, a braking system is going to be a very important thing. We don't want to purely rely on our motorhome to stop itself and our Jeep, so that's where the braking system is going to take some of that strain and stress off, and it's going to help reduce the time that it takes to slow down and the distance. Our InvisiBrake is going to activate the brakes inside of our Jeep by having a pulley and cable pull on our brake pedal, helping it slow down. So whenever we push on the brakes in our motorhome, it'll activate the cable and it'll pull on the brakes in our Jeep. Now the nicest thing about our InvisiBrake is that once we have it installed, we're not going to have to mess with anything. It's going to be a permanent installation, and this is the most that we're going to see, is this small bracket that's going to be at the bottom of our brake pedal. We're not going to have to worry about moving one of those portable braking systems with those big boxes, getting everything set up perfectly inside every time we want to flat tow our Jeep. We can simply put our Jeep in tow mode and hit the road. Our InvisiBrake is going to have a control unit that we remotely mounted underneath the seat. Now we're going to have a gauge here that's going to let us know the air pressure that's being applied. And the yellow knob here is going to allow us to adjust the braking force either more or less depending on the road conditions and how we like to have it set. Now we're not going to have to worry about any kind of false braking because our InvisiBrake is only going to apply the brakes to our Jeep when our brake lights are illuminated in our motorhome. Now like most braking systems, our InvisiBrake is going to include a breakaway switch. Now this is going to be in case of an accidental disconnect from our motorhome, in which case this pin would be pulled and it's going to apply the brakes at full force on our Jeep. Our InvisiBrake is also going to have a monitor light that we can mount inside our motorhome, so that way we can always know what's going on inside of our Jeep. Whenever we press the brakes in our motorhome, the light is going to illuminate, letting us know that the brakes are being applied in our Jeep. And whenever we let go, the light will go out. Now there is a safety built into our indicator light. If the brakes are being applied for more than 20 seconds, the InvisiBrake is going to let go. So if we're sitting at a stoplight where we don't need to have them on, if we hold them for a little bit, the light will go out. Now there's another safety built in. If we were, for some reason, had something fall on our brake pedal inside of our Jeep that's constantly holding the brake down, not only is that indicator light going to come on, but it's also going to have an alarm letting us know that there's an issue and that the brakes are not releasing. So with the braking system being a requirement almost everywhere we go when we flat tow a vehicle, our InvisiBrake is going to be a great permanent solution that's going to keep us within the law and get us safely down the road. So now that we've seen how it works and gone over some of the features, let's show you how we routed everything. Our InvisiBrake is going to have a control box that we're going to have to mount. Now typically you'd mount this underneath the driver's front seat, but in our application we have a safe that's permanently mounted, so we had to find a different spot. So we're going to mount it underneath the back seat on the driver's side. But we left everything loose so we could see and show you how we made all our connections. On the back of the unit, we're going to have four major components coming out of it. We're going to have an 1/8 inch air line, and we're going to have a 1/4 inch vacuum hose attached to it, where then we're going to have a 1/4 inch air line, a 4-pin connector with a red and black cable, and then a black cable coming out as well. And then we're going to have another connector that's going to have our 4-pole wiring attached to it. Now we just went underneath our seat and we ran all the wires along the edge of the threshold here, going behind this panel. Now this center panel here really doesn't come all the way out because it is hooked into where our seat belts are. But we just removed these 2 push pins here as well as on the front and tucked them underneath the wire going up towards the front of our Jeep. So we just ran our wire up towards the front of our Jeep. Now this panel here doesn't fully come out because our seat belts are bolted in. So we just remove these 2 push pins and tuck the wire underneath going along the threshold. So we just taped all of our wires and air lines together and we ran them straight up to the front. Now most of these are going to be going outside, but that 1/8 inch air line is going to be getting attached to this air cylinder here. So we just kept everything bundled up and we ran our air line to it. Now we had to pull up the carpet because on the end of our air cylinder, we're going to have this cable. Now the cable is what's going to activate our brake pedal and cause the movement. If we follow our cable up, we'll have an anchor point on the firewall here. And if we go over, we'll see that it's mounted to a pulley and eventually on this bracket. Now mounting up this bracket and that pulley is very important. That's probably one of the most key components of our kit. We want to make sure that the bracket here attached to the brake pedal is as low as possible, but without interfering with actually pushing on the brake pedal for normal driving. That way it'll have the most torque, being able to pull on that brake pedal and apply the brakes. Now specifically for our Jeep, the pulley does need to be mounted horizontally, and you just want to make sure that that cable is centered in the pulley and not off center, which could cause damage to it. Once you have everything lined up, there's going to be 2 nuts on the end of this cable here that we can have slight adjustment either to bring that cable out or bring it in, but you just want to have a little bit of play in the cable to where when we push on it, we can see that little ball just barely sticking out. Now for the air cylinder, you just want to make sure that the cable here doesn't have too many big tight curves in it. You want to do a big loop to where it's a real gradual curve, and we're just going to stick all the excess under the carpet, that way it's out of the way, and then just brought our air cylinder back right along the threshold panel so it'll be hidden once we put that panel back in place. Now for the rest of our airline tubes and wiring, this is going to have to go to the outside underneath the hood. So we followed it going along that threshold, and then on the very left hand side of the firewall we're going to have a grommet. Now we have that grommet because our Jeep is an automatic. Normally that's where your clutch master cylinder would go, but since we don't have a clutch, it's a very easy point to go through to get to the firewall. So we sent all those air lines and tubes out through the firewall into the engine bay. Now everything came out just right to the outside of where our brake booster was. And to start out with, we'll follow our black and red wire. Now we just ran that along the firewall over to the passenger side, and that's going to be the power and ground source for our unit. So we took our red wire, we spliced in a fuse holder and put it directly to the positive side of our battery. Then we took our ground wire, routed it along this factory wiring here, and then put it directly to the negative side of our battery post. For the airline tube that's coming out, this is going to be working with our vacuum system. Because if you've ever pushed on a brake pedal when a vehicle's off, you know that it can get a lot tighter and harder to push. So our InvisiBrake is going to work with our vacuum in our vehicle. Now the way we're going to hook it up is we're going to find our brake booster, follow the line, and you're going to want to find a nice flat spot in there. So we made 2 cuts, one right at the beginning of the flat spot and then a little bit farther down. First thing we put in was a check valve right here. Now there's 2 check valves in your kit, and you're just going to want to use whichever one fits the hose that works on your vehicle. Now here's the other one for demonstration purposes, but you'll notice that it has a red stripe on it. The one in there does too, but you want to make sure that that red stripe is pointing towards the engine. So you put your check valve in place on the end you cut, and then we'll take a section of vacuum hose from our kit and put it on the other end of our check valve. And then we're going to have a T that we'll put in place, connect the other end of our vacuum line, and then on that third section we'll take some 1/4 inch vacuum line and press that 1/4 inch airline tube into it. So we're gonna have two more cables coming out. It's gonna be that 4-pole wiring and that black cable. Now the 4-pole wiring is gonna need to tie into your existing wiring on your Jeep. Now since we had 4-pole wiring already in there and a plug on the front to hook up to our motorhome, we simply just routed this towards the front, and you're gonna tie these in color for the other wiring. If yours aren't color coded, the green is gonna go towards your right turn signal, yellow to your left turn signal, brown to your taillight signal, and white is gonna be your ground. Now the only difference between all of our colors is our white is gonna tie in, but we're also gonna have to run a separate ground on this wire. Now the black cable we routed towards the front of our Jeep, and then we dropped it down right behind the headlight here and the washer tank so that we can get up to the front bumper. Now our cable is gonna meet up with our breakaway switch, and our breakaway switch we mounted directly to the front of our base plate using a short bracket, and you can pick one of these up here at eTrailer.com. But we just routed it down and then along the front of our skid plate, zip tying it behind everything, trying to keep it out of the way the best we can, and then ended up drilling a hole because there's not really a good access point to get through, and then we filled it up with silicone to make sure that it keep the wire from chafing and also seal up that hole. There's one more wire that we're going to need to install, and it's going to be an indicator light wire that's going to tap into the cold side of our brake switch. On our Jeep, we did have to put in a brake light relay, so whenever you put your indicator light on, you want to make sure that you tap into the closest side of that relay to the brake switch. In this case, it would be on the green wire on our relay harness. We took a butt connector, connected the two wires together, and then ran it back out to the engine bay. So that wire came out that grommet again, and we ran it along the same path as our 4-pole and our breakaway switch right directly to the front of our Jeep. Now normally you would have that wire just hanging out, and it would have a connector that would match up with this patch cord. And this would go in between our Jeep and our motorhome. However, we took a little bit different approach because, let's face it, not everybody's gonna remember to hold on to this, and it can get lost or it can get damaged. So we wired ours into our 6-way so that we can just use the cord that's gonna provide our lighting. It's also gonna provide our indicator light. So we wired it into our 6-way to the brake controller circuit. Now we can move over to the motorhome and wire the other side of it up. But before we do that, let's go ahead and put all our panels back in place. Now whenever we go to put the carpet back, you can see that it's gonna be hitting that cable. Now we're going to make a couple relief cuts so that we can get everything back in place so that our cable isn't going to rub on our carpet. Now not only do we need to cut for the cable going across to the pedal, but we also need to make a relief cut for this side of the cable so it doesn't chafe against the carpet. So the easiest way to do this is if we just put our carpet loosely back in place, then we can see where everything's going to land. And then just take a knife and slowly cut away what we need to. You can always cut a little more, but we don't want to hack up all of our carpet if we don't have to. Now we just need to mount our actual box. Now we do have some tabs on either side that have this little loop in there, and we can take some self-tapping screws and just drill it right into the floorboard. But to prevent having to put more holes in our Jeep, what we can do is on either side, since it's being mounted to the carpet or by an area that has carpet, we're gonna cut a slit in the carpet just wide enough for these tabs to go in. And then we're gonna bend these down, slide it under the carpet, and then press down to bend it flat so it'll hold it in place. On the motorhome side, we're gonna have another cable that's gonna match the one that we use in our car, except this one's gonna be about 50 feet long. So on one end, we're gonna start at the back here, and we're gonna need to take our 7-way off. They're all gonna be a little different, but we're gonna need to dismount our 7-way. So we'll take out the mounting screws. And we're going to pull it out so that we can get access to the back of it and the wires on the back side. If it has silicone or anything else, we're going to want to remove all of this so that we can get inside and wire our plug in. And whenever you are removing the silicone or any other kind of material back here, you want to be careful. You don't want to damage the wires. You just want to remove enough so that we can get into the inside of the connector. Then we're going to remove the screws so that we can open it up. Once we have our 7-way taken apart, we're going to have a lot of different terminals on the back side. Now, since we wired our Jeep, the terminal we used there was the brake output signal. So we're going to be looking for the brake output signal. And on our 7-way, it's going to be the blue wire. Now, yours may or may not have a wire going to it already. If it does, that's all right. We'll just go ahead and take the patch. We'll take the cord. We're going to cut off the connector on the end here, and we'll strip back the end of the wire. So we'll pass it through the connector on our 7-way, and we're going to loosen up that terminal with the blue wire. Now, you can either remove that blue wire or just add the new cord to it. So we'll just loosen up the terminal, and we're going to add that wire from our kit to the brake output terminal. You just want to make sure that you get your wire nice and tight and that it isn't going to reach over and touch any of the other terminals. So we'll just trim a little bit of it off, slide it behind that plate. Then all we have left to do is put our 7-way back together. And then we're going to run that wire all the way to the front. Now, whenever you're routing your wire, you just want to stay along the edge of the frame rail and zip tied to some existing wiring that's already there. Just stay away from heat sources or any other moving parts. Now, I do want to mention that since we are eliminating that patch cord and we tied into our 7-way, the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we don't have a brake controller in our motorhome, or if that circuit's not being used. If it is being used or you have a brake controller, you're still going to run everything the same. We're just going to leave that cord hanging out down here and utilize the patch cord between our motorhome and Jeep. And then on the Jeep side, we're not going to tie it into the 6-way. We just, again, would leave that cord hanging down. So we ran our wire up along the frame, and then we found this spot right here where all of our factory wire comes in. We just poked a hole, filled it back up with some silicone. We ran the wire along this threshold underneath this panel, came up along the weather stripping, and we have our light, we have our indicator light mounted right here on the dash. Now, in order to get this in place, you will need to drill a 5/16 hole. And this panel here, it does come down. And the way we have it wired up is our indicator light is going to have 2 wires coming off it, a red and a white. Then we're going to have an alarm that's going to get wired in as well, that's going to have a red and a white. And basically, you want to take the 2 reds, put them together, and that's going to tie into that wire that we ran from the back. Then we'll take our 2 white wires, tie those together, and then we're going to ground it out to a solid piece directly to the body. So we can line our panel back up. Pop it back in place. Whenever you're looking for a spot to mount your indicator light, you do want to find a spot that's going to be visible but out of the way where it's not going to obstruct anything else. Now, keep in mind, this is only one component of a safe flat toe setup. For a complete setup, you're going to need a base plate, a tow bar wiring, a braking system, and then specifically for our Jeep, we're also going to need a brake light relay. And that'll finish up your look at the Roadmaster InvisiBrake Supplemental Braking System, part number RM-8700 on our 2018 Jeep Wrangler JK Unlimited.